The music and the cast for A Prairie Home Companion are both very, very good. For me, that's where the quality ends. And I will explain this. This was released in 2006. It's directed by Robert Altman. It's written by Garrison, Keillor. And it's based on A Prairie Home Companion, believe it or not, which was a weekly radio variety show that ran from 1974 to 2016. Now, bearing in mind this film was released in 2006, but represents a time when the show was facing its last ever show, I'm not really sure what this is meant to represent. But also the narrative isn't very strong. I'm feeling like, understandably to some extent, this is aimed at people who are fans of A Prairie Home Companion, which is absolutely fine. But I feel like compared to the average film, that's a very small pocket of viewers. I feel like a good film you can watch without any background knowledge. You know, bearing in mind I went into this with some background knowledge because I did some reading about it, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. But a good film can introduce you to something and make you want to learn more. And I have zero interest in exploring the actual Prairie Home Companion in any more detail because, as I said, apart from some good music and some pretty good performances, it was very, very boring. So I'm willing to admit that maybe it's aimed more at fans of the radio show, but as I said, a good film would be able to draw me into that world and allow me to become interested in it, and it didn't happen. As I said, it is about the apparent last show that they're putting on, and we have a whole bunch of musical performances. The songs are absolutely brilliant. It says it's a comedy. I found some of the songs funny, but certainly not the situations or the characters. But some of the songs were pretty amusing. And there is not really much of a narrative for the most part. At one point, it does get a bit emotional. I won't spoil it by saying what happens. But at certain points, here and there, there's a little bit of emotion. But in general, the narrative is very lacking. The story is very weak. The characters themselves, I didn't find interesting. But as I said, the musical performances were very strong, and the cast is brilliant, and I should probably tell you about the cast. The cast is, well, it features Woody Harrelson. It's because of Woody Harrelson that I became aware of this. We also have Kevin Kline, Meryl Streep, Lily Tomlin, Lindsay Lohan, John C. Reilly, Maya Rudolph. Needless to say, the cast is strong, the musical performances are great, and there are a lot of musical performances, which is something I really appreciate, because there's nothing worse, and that's a slight exaggeration. There are a few things worse than a film that advertises itself as a musical and there are maybe 3 songs in it. That's definitely not the case here. Pretty happy with the music. In fact, I wouldn't mind listening to just the soundtrack for this, because the soundtrack is pretty decent, but the story isn't. The characters are dull, and honestly, I didn't really understand what the point in this film was. Particularly, as I said, the actual radio show went on until 2016. I could understand if this was released once the radio show had finished as a kind of homage to that and a kind of a way to wrap everything up. That would have made sense. But maybe I'm missing something. That information wasn't on Wikipedia, so I'm not too sure about that. Also, if it's important to anybody, Garrison Keillor does actually play himself, which I guess is a pretty cool thing if you're a fan of the radio show. I would love to know what anybody thinks of this if you're a fan of the radio show. It definitely seems to be that's the kind of the general audience that this is aimed at, which, as I said, is absolutely fine, but it doesn't mean that I'm going to enjoy the film. Do I recommend it? I guess I'd recommend it if you're a fan of the radio show. I'd love to know what you think. If you're a fan of any of the cast, absolutely. But if you're just looking for an interesting story, then unfortunately, it's not one that I can really recommend.